Resilient You with Alicia Pozsony, resilience expert, mental health advocate, and behavior specialist, aiming to help people to live more fulfilled lives. Have you been through challenges? Have you come out on top of a situation that you knew you just had to get out of? Or maybe you were in a situation and needed help. Maybe you didn't know that you could ask for help. Maybe you didn't accept help. Join us as we meet with special guests who will help us to become more emotionally strong. Good morning, everyone. Thanks so much for joining Resilient You. Each week we have special guests who come on and share with us their experiences, their stories of resiliency. And today we have a special guest, Edie Weinstein. Edie has a lot of experience, and she is not only a counselor, but she's also a creative journalist. She's a psychotherapist, ordained interfaith minister, speaker, author, PR, and marketing person. She's also the founder of Hug Mobsters Armed with Love, which offers free hugs worldwide. Edie, thanks so much for joining us.
My pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
So I know when we first connected, you were very interested to help our listeners learn from your experiences. So can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Well, one of the first things that I wanted to share, because it's so timely, it has everything to do with resilience, is on yesterday. Actually, I'm looking at the date. Yesterday, June 12th, I experienced my 8th cardioversary. Celebrated my 8th cardioversary. 8 years ago, I had a heart attack. I was 55 years old, and I was on my way home from the gym. After doing what I thought was a normal workout 5 or 6 times a week. I was at the gym, and I was driving like the 15 minutes home, and I experienced symptoms that are very different from men's heart attack symptoms. It's not the left side crushing chest pain, arm going numb symptoms that women tend to have. It was like somebody grabbed my jaw and I couldn't move it. Torrential sweats. Heart palpitations, lightheadedness, dizziness, heartburn, but it was in my back, not my chest. And I knew right away I was having a heart attack. And I can only chalk it up to oxygen deprivation because I didn't go straight to the hospital. I drove home and I made a phone call. I called my boss and said I wasn't feeling well and could they cancel my clients for the day. I was working as a counselor in an outpatient drug and alcohol rehab. And then I thought, oh my God, I feel really sweaty. I need to take a shower. And immediately my thought was, what are you doing, woman? Get to the hospital. Again, oxygen deprivation. I didn't call 911. I drove myself to the hospital. Don't ever do that. If you're in the middle of a heart attack, call 911. So fortunately, the hospital was about 10 minutes from my home. And I stumbled in to the ER and said, I think I'm having a heart attack. And they whisked me up to the cardiac cath lab. They inserted the catheter in my right wrist. And about an hour later, I had a stent. I had a fully occluded LAD, like the big widowmaker artery, the thing that causes the oops, you're done kind of heart attack. And I wasn't scared. I wasn't feeling any anxiety. It was just numbness, like emotional numbness. And right after the surgery, my first thought was, oh my God, what did you do to yourself? And I realized that there were a lot of factors involved with the heart attack. My mother died of congestive heart failure. I worked 12 to 14-hour days, slept maybe 5 or 6 hours a night. I wasn't eating healthfully. I was rushing through my meals. I was, believe it or not, working out too much, according to my doc. I was taking on the weight of the world emotionally. I'm a recovering workaholic, codependent. So I practiced what I called savior behavior, which meant fixing everybody's problems for them. So my body had said, that's it, we're done. Not done as in dead, but done as in you can't do this anymore. So the surgeon came in showing me 2 images. The first one was of the artery looking like a broken tree branch. And then the second one was with the stent in it, and it was popped back up. And he said, "Don't let this happen again." And I explained to him about my history and what I did. He said, "You're going to have to make some major lifestyle changes." So I changed my eating habits. I, believe it or not, cut back on working out. I had to take cardiac meds, which I still take now 8 years later. And I had to stop being such I said that I used to be a type A overachiever. Now I'm like a B plus. I can dial it back a little bit more. And naps became my friend. I used to say that sleep was highly overrated, and now when I need to, I take naps. So that was a big wake up call for me. And my encouragement for anybody, no matter who it is listening to this, listen to your body. You don't have to be all things to all people. You get to take naps, you get to say no. So that was a big lesson for me.
Wow. So that is so amazing. The fact that, you didn't go to the hospital right away,
Yep,
and, oxygen deprivation would lead you to, unclear thinking, and,
right,
and of course, if you didn't have anyone with you to notice any behavioral differences or
right.
anything like that, that's definitely something else.
Hmm.
It's kind of a miracle, right? That you.
Yeah, I think so. I think I still have more work to do. And what I said, a couple of insights, inspiration came from that. One of them was I was burning the candle at both ends till there was no more wax left. And the second thing was the woman that I was died that day, not literally, but spiritually, psychologically, emotionally, died that day to give birth to the one that's talking to you now. And she had to die because she was killing me. My
Mm-mm.
behaviors were literally trying to kill me.
Yeah, and I know from myself, I'm going to be 50 this year. I don't, in my mind, I don't feel 50, and yet my body is giving me these signals that, hey, you're not what you once were. And so,
Right.
it's interesting to hear your story, and hopefully, you'll be an inspiration to others who are listening. Sometimes we have things happen to us, and we're not really aware of what they are.
Right.
And a wake up call, like when you were talking about the picture that you saw, the doctor brought in the image. It was like a
Mhm.
tree branch, and um, you know, in a lot of cases, people have physical things that happen to their body, and they don't have that picture. They just have the feeling. So that's a really wonderful thing that you said, that
Mhm.
your wake up call is something that can be encouraging to others, to go to the doctor, slow
Mhm.
down, take time, and really listen to yourself, because
Yeah.
our physical and mental well-being is critical, especially today. Everything is so fast paced, and
Right.
we have to make money and take care of our families, or go to that next level and get to that next goal. And
Mhm.
even the kids today are doing that. They're so scheduled, every waking hour of the day. So
Mhm.
it's wonderful to have you take this time and share your experience with others. um,
Mhm.
so the woman who was birthed that day, um, what did it take you to make those behavioral changes, right? Because it's not easy changing your way of life.
Nope, nope. The biggest behavioral change, the hardest one, wasn't changing diet, wasn't going to cardiac rehab. I loved going, but because I had goals, they set goals for me. But the hardest behavioral change was slowing down. I right around the time, right before I went to the hospital, I was offered a different job. I was working at the time, as I mentioned, for an outpatient drug and alcohol rehab, so it was really stressful. And I was offered a job working from home for a company that ran drug and alcohol rehabs, and they hired me to be on the editorial team, which meant that I wrote web content for them, blogs having to do with addiction recovery and mental health issues. And I thought, what an ideal job. And it lasted a year and 3 months. And then they had massive layoffs. And
Mm.
then they declared bankruptcy. So
Oh.
ideal job went whoop, out the window. But fortunately, I found the job that I have now, working again as a psychotherapist in a group therapy practice. Still working from home during the pandemic, which makes life so much easier. But the hardest part was not going back to work right away. I was lying in the hospital bed, and two dear friends came to visit me. And one of them was a cardiac patient himself. So he'd been in and out of the hospital.
Mhm.
And Phil was from New York, and he had a very strong accent. He leans over the bed. He says, "You go back to work next week, I come over and break both your legs." And I believed him. And his wife, Janet, said, "I insist on speaking to your social worker. He or she needs to know what your lifestyle is like and tell you you got to slow down." I don't even remember who the social worker was at the time. So that was a big change. Another one was in the middle of the night. You know how at hospitals they come in and wake you up when you're sound asleep to take your vital signs to make
Right.
sure you're still breathing.
Yeah.
A nurse came in like 3 or 4 in the morning, and she was a cancer survivor, breast cancer survivor. And we started talking about that. And she said, when you are healed, sufficiently healed, when you're rested, but not until then, you need to go out there in the world and talk to women about cardiac care. And
Mm.
I thought, it's not just cardiac care, it's heart health. And our hearts are more than just that organ that keeps our lives going. We talk about the heart being a source of connection with other people. So during cardiac rehab, I used to walk through my like a local town called Doylestown, Pennsylvania, in Bucks County. And a few months before that, I had taken a group of friends to 30th Street Station, which is a big train station in Philly, to do a free hugs flash mob. It was Valentine's Day weekend of 2014. And in that period of time, we estimated that between the dozen of us, we hugged a few hundred people. And one of the people that was there who approached us and asked to hug was an Iraq War vet. And he said, "I'm the only survivor of my platoon, and I have survivor's guilt. I thought about ending my life until I met you people. Can I join you?" So, of course, we were, tears streaming down, and we gave him his own free hug sign, and he was off to the races. Now, I don't remember, I couldn't even, if I saw the man again, couldn't even tell you, that I'd recognize him. I pray that he found his footing and went on to live a, good life. And then a few months later is when the heart attack happened. So as part of my cardiac rehab, as I said, I walked through Doylestown. I said, why don't I combine the hugging with the walking? Because again, hugs are heart friendly too, emotionally and cardiac heart friendly. So I started doing that, and friends started calling us hug mobsters, flash mob, hug mob. And I thought, oh, mobsters, guns, drugs, violence. I don't think so. So I added the tagline, armed with love.
Mm.
And since then, I estimate that we've hugged many thousands of people. Sometimes I do it myself. Sometimes I have, my friends would come with me. We've hugged pretty much on the East Coast, but then I was visiting friends in Portland, Oregon a number of years ago. I did the free hugs thing there. I did it in Canada. And then in May of 2018, I hugged my way across Ireland. And then a little thing called coronavirus showed up, and it put a came to a screeching halt. So I haven't done a free hugs stroll since then. Occasionally I'll hug people like out on the street, but I haven't done a major free hugs event. So that's been challenging. Not being able to do that, but I'm hoping that there'll be a time soon when it'll feel safe to do it again.
Yeah, yeah, and, that's it's so true. I've spoken to a lot of people during COVID who, they're huggers. Everything from a Girl Scout troop where we, have our interlocking friendship circle at the end, and then, the girls get to spin out. There's no
Mhm.
touching involved, and, families when we were getting together originally, you'd have to socially distance and you can't hug, and, it's interesting. One of my daughter's friends the other day said, "Well, your mom hugs you, doesn't she?" And my daughter had to think about it because the truth is we I got so used to, like, being away from, people, not that I don't hug my kids, I do, I make it a point at least once a day intentionally now, but before that moment, I realized that I didn't have that as a connection during the day, and so and as a woman, I mean, I know myself, I do a lot of things. I don't know if I'm a type A personality, but I'm very busy, and so, to make that time, people have different, love languages that they practice.
Mhm.
Oftentimes, I give, couples or even siblings this love language test, and one of the things in there is, how do you show love? How do you receive
Yep.
it? And so, physical touch of hugs, that's something that
Mhm.
is, it's more. Um, it works for some better than others, right? So,
Mhm.
how is that
Right.
when you're going out on the stroll? What is
Mhm.
that like? How do people react?
Right. Well, everybody is different. I would say that my primary love language is touch as well. I grew up in a very nurturing, physically affectionate family, so I think I was raised to do this. And some people say yes, and some people say no. And part of what this is consent education. That I teach people that it's just as valid to say no to a hug as it is to say yes. So if they say no, I'll say, well, how about high fives or fist bumps or eye hugs, where you smile through your eyes, and they're okay with that. There are some people that initially say no and then they change their minds. When there are children there, when I'm out at a public event, like a street fair or some kind of community event, and there are children standing there with their grown-ups, I'll say to the adult, if it's okay with you and okay with the child, can I hug the child? And if the parent or the adult says yes, but the child says no, I say, you know what? I'm not gonna. And I say to the adult, this is a teachable moment that they need to understand that their body is their own and nobody touches them without permission. Not once did a parent say, how dare you tell me how to raise my child? They agreed. Because they sometimes will say, oh, go hug that lady. And I'll say, do you want to? And if they say no, then I say, okay. But I did have that happen where a child changed their mind after I was standing and talking to mom and dad for a little while. He came over and hugged me. He was like
Mm,
7 or 8, something like that. So there are some people, even close friends of mine, they'll hug me, but they would never go out and do what I do. They're just
right.
not comfortable hugging strangers. But there's a tremendous health benefit to hugging even strangers. When you hug someone heart to heart, there's a resonance. There's a heart. You find your heartbeat aligning, matching somebody else's. Feel cared about when they're hugged. It's a stress reliever. It's a pain reliever. There's a brain chemical called oxytocin, and it's the cuddle hormone. So what I say is more oxytocin means less oxycontin. That people don't they respond well to nurturing touch again by consent.
Right, right.
So it's been a joy. I really really enjoyed doing that, and I look forward to a time when I can do it again consistently.
Wonderful. So, Edie, you've shared with us a lot of, how you have been a survivor. Um, I know that on this show we talk about being resilient, and
Hmm.
you've already demonstrated ways you've done that from your different lifestyle changes, and the blessing that you've been reborn, into a new with a new purpose. And um, do you want to talk a little bit about some of the things that you've been through, maybe stressful situations that you've been
Hmm.
through, or
Sure.
maybe something that a situation where you thought you might give up?
Hmm. I don't think I've ever given up. I was raised to be resilient. My parents went through a lot themselves. My mother's father, my maternal grandfather, died when she was 18. When my mother was 18. Her mother died when I was 4. So I think that would have made my mother 38, maybe something like that. So she lost her parents fairly early. My father's father died when he was 32 because he was at their wedding, but by the time I was born, he had already died. And then his mother died when I was like 13. So although his both parents lived a little bit longer than my mother's did, they both had to kind of stand on their own fairly early on. So they taught me that no matter what, you're going to get through it. My father used to have this saying. He said, if that's the worst thing that ever happens to you, you'll be okay. And at first, it was paradoxical when I thought about it, because it felt comforting to know that he believed that I could get through anything, but it also felt dismissive. So one thing as a therapist that I encourage people who've been through trauma or loss is to express it. Don't do a spiritual bypass and say, it'll be okay. Don't even talk about it. Don't worry about it. Sometimes you got to get down in the muck and the mire with loss and feel it and sob and wail and whatever you need to do, kick up a temper tantrum, you know, just to get, allow the emotions to express themselves. Then you could say, okay, now what? What's the next step? But you got to get through the mess first, because a lot of us don't like. I would prefer to just push right through it. I didn't want to have to deal with the mess. When I had the heart attack, I met this woman in cardiac rehab who was a good deal older than me. She's probably, I would say, in her 80s by now, and she'd had cardiac surgery probably like 7 or 8 years before my heart attack. And she spoke about it. She taught. She wrote a book about it. And she said, "You realize you've experienced a trauma." And I said, "What are you talking about? I'm fine." She said, No. A heart attack is a trauma. And I encourage you to treat yourself the way you would any trauma survivor that you see in your practice. So I started being more gentle with myself and saying, okay, if you feel depressed, it's understandable. Because my thought after was, after what did you do to yourself, is how can I keep it from happening again? And I don't want to feel like a cardiac patient for the rest of my life. And she said, you are a cardiac patient. You will always be, that you always need to be mindful of that.
Hmm.
And that's tough so part of my thriving as a someone who's experienced a cardiac event is recognizing that that's always going to be a part of my history, right? A part of what I've experienced. But I call it a cardioversary, so it feels like a celebration. Like, okay, second chance at life, brand new, fresh start. So
Wonderful.
that's one of them is losing my grandmother at 14, losing the other grandmother at 13. I'm sorry, losing my one grandmother at 4, losing my second grandmother at 13 or 14. I was widowed at 40. That was in 1998. In 1992, we experienced what I called our year from hell. We had moved down to Homestead, Florida, and in March of that year of 1992, I had an ectopic pregnancy, didn't even know I was pregnant, and the fallopian tube ruptured and I almost bled to death. So at that time, like a month before, the only good thing that happened that year is we adopted our son. He was almost 5. And you know how people who are trying to get pregnant, and if there's nothing biologically, physiologically wrong, they say, just relax, it'll happen. Well, again, right after we adopted our son, boom, got pregnant, and again had the ectopic. So that was in February. In March of that year, my husband was diagnosed with hepatitis C, which is a liver disease. And in August of that year, we lost our home to Hurricane Andrew. As I said, we were living in Homestead, which was ground zero for the hurricane. We moved back up to Pennsylvania, where we were from originally. And 6 years later, my husband died. So I became the mother, single parent of an 11-year-old son. And you know how that ridiculous saying that when you're a single parent, you have to be both mother and father? I can't. I couldn't be a father. I didn't know how. So I tapped a few platonic male friends and said, would you be willing to be my son, Adam's go-to guys? And one of them was Phil. He was the one that threatened to break both my legs, if I went back to work too soon. Phil became Adam's unofficial big brother, and then a father figure. And then toward the end of Phil's life, because he died of a cardiac condition himself, but toward the end of Phil's life, he and Adam were father and son. And when my son got married, Phil and I were going to walk him down the aisle together, and he died a week prior. So Phil's wife Janet and I walked Adam down the aisle, taking him together instead. So I had that loss. My parents died. My father in 2008, my mother in 2010. They were both on hospice, and when I wasn't down there as much when my dad was sick because my mom was there to help take care of him. But when he died, and 2 years later, my mother ended up on hospice. I was there, I think, 7 times in the last 6 months of her life because they were living in Florida,
Hmm.
and that was a remarkable journey. I don't know if have you ever been with someone who's on hospice?
No, although, I have a very small family, so, I
Mhm.
don't consider that a blessing at all. But at this stage in life, yes, my husband's parents are, they're living in Florida as well. And, we're starting to deal with some of that now.
Yeah, yeah.
But
So there's so end of life. But my mother and I had a very close. I was close to both my parents, but different, different kind of relationship. But my mother and I had a very symbiotic relationship, and I was honored to be a hands-on caregiver for her. Bathing, dressing. She could feed herself, but at one point when I was changing her, because she was, incontinent toward the end of her life, she said baby to baby. And I said, what do you mean, Mom? And I knew exactly what she meant. She said, when you were little, I took care of you this way. Now you're the mommy and I'm the baby. And I
mm,
still tear up when I think about that. And it was an honor to be able to be there for her in that way. And we would take all of these fantasy trips where I'd say, okay, where are we going today, Mom? And she'd say, oh, we're going to Hawaii. Well, she and my father had traveled a lot, but they never went to Hawaii, and it was on their bucket list. And I said, okay, well, what are we going to do there? And she said, we're going to dance the hula and get laid. And she meant, having lays around our neck. And I said, oh, two wild women out on the town getting laid. Sounds fun. So, and I said, well, what are we going to do? Where are we going to go? She said, oh, we're going to go to a luau, but no roast pork. And I said, okay, a kosher luau.
mhm.
And I said, well, what are we going to eat if we're not going to have that? She said, we're going to have s'mores. And I said, I don't think they serve s'mores at luau's, but I bet they serve s'mores in heaven. And she said, I hope so. So every once in a while, I will indulge in her
Mhm,
honor.
mhm. Wonderful.
And there's been a tremendous amount of communication with both of them, but more so with my mother. At one point, when she was pretty close to death, like a few months prior, I said, what do you think happens when we die? She said, I don't know. And I said, well, is Daddy going to be waiting for you? I don't know. Your parents, Uncle Jimmy, her brother? She said, I don't know. And I said, well, when you do know, come back and tell me. And she said, I'll come back as a butterfly. So I have seen so many butterflies in unexpected and unusual places that I'm sure is a message from her.
Mm,
So that's part of my resilience as well. It's the comfort of being, being in touch with them. Then a few years later, a dear friend died of cancer, and I went along the journey with her as well. So Andrea died coming up on 4 years now, and it was, again, I was one of her caregivers. So I think that's apparently part of my purpose. So I've lost a few friends since then. So those, what I've come to realize is that life happens. And when Michael, my husband, was in the ICU, I would have what I call God conversations, and I still have them now. And I said, he's mine and you can't have him. And God said, no, he's mine and he's on loan to you like everybody else in your life.
mm,
So
mm,
that's how I've come to appreciate the people in my life, is to realize we're on loan to each other.
mm. Well, Edie, you've said so much. When you talked about thriving and, feeling your emotions instead of stuffing them and ignoring them, that's so brave of you and honest. And, that's a message that I want to share with all the listeners that, if you're just happily going through your life, ignoring whatever you might be feeling deep down or something that you had gone through years ago and never dealt with, it's something that, hopefully this can prompt you to start thinking about that and being honest with yourself, because as you're learning from Edie, you can see what a wonderful full life that she has,
Mhm.
and she's really able to help others and do good things while enjoying her life, thriving. So I want to share that. Of course, that's
Thank
a
you.
wonderful sentiment.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, my life is incredibly full and rich. I have two grandchildren who are I tell them both that they're my two favorite people on the planet. One of them is 2.5. Dean was born right at the beginning of the pandemic, and then Lucy was born 5 weeks ago.
Mm.
So it's a joy. And another challenge that we had was at the beginning of the pandemic, I had been one of his caregivers. So I was over at my son and daughter-in-law's house pretty much every morning. And then lockdown happened. And I didn't see him for 11 weeks.
Mm.
And that was so hard. I live alone. I have wonderful family and friends, but I didn't see any of them for 11 weeks. And the first mammal that I hugged was my cousin's dog. I visited with her, and we sat in her backyard, like 20 feet away. And Maddie, who's a chocolate lab, who thinks she's a lap dog, how big dogs normally think that. She kept running back and forth between the two of us and jumping in my lap, and she was all muddy, and I didn't care.
Mm.
Would send me videos of him, and when we were finally able to reconnect, it was a joy, and I never take that for granted. And he's an excellent big brother. He loves helping to take care of his baby sister, and we do everything we can to make sure that he feels like he's still the king, that he hasn't been replaced. So that's one of my joys. I have dear friends. I love my work. I'm a journalist primarily. I mean, I'm a therapist by education, but I'm a journalist by passion. I love
Mm.
to write. So that's
Wonderful.
that's been healing as well.
So how can people contact you? We're not done yet with the interview,
Okay,
but
yeah, no
since you're
problem. Well, I have a website. It's www.opti, O-P-T-I hyphen mystical, mystical.com. And I'm also on Facebook as Edie, Edie, Weinstein, Weinstein. And where the optimistical came from is that several years ago, I got a message, either in a dream or in meditation, that said, you're not just an optimist, you're an optimistic who sees the world through the eyes of possibility. And that's my focus, is seeing the world through the eyes of possibility, because it's so easy to have limiting thinking, negative thinking, like, oh, this sucks. I mean, I go through it like everybody else. I'm struggling with the state of the world right now. And there are times when I feel helpless to do diddly squat about it. But because I'm a gracefully aging, tree hugging hippie, I'm a social activist. I go to vigils and rallies and protests, and I write about peace and social justice issues. So I was having another one of those conversations, and I said, well, what do I do? How do I deal with this? And the response was, you get out of bed every day, you take a shower, you go be with your grandchildren, you come home, you see clients, you write, you teach, you speak, you pray, you meditate, you spend time in nature, you listen to music, you dance, you work out, you hug when you can, you love. And that's it. That's, it's like that. I forget who wrote the book, Chop Wood, Carry Water. Have you ever heard that saying before?
No, I haven't.
Know that one? It's based on, I don't know if it's a Buddhist saying, what do you do before you're enlightened? Chop wood, carry water. What do you do after you're enlightened? Chop wood, carry water. So that's the same thing, that we need to do whatever we can every day to make the world a better place. And I got motivation. I've got 2 little grandchildren, and I want to leave a better world for them than the one they're living in right now. And it's not just my grandchildren, it's everybody's children. Every child who gets themselves born deserves to have a good world left for them. So every child is my child. Every person is family to me.
Yeah, yeah. Well, so that's wonderful. So you provide counseling. eh,
Yeah, I
Um,
work at a counseling center. I see clients there, but I also speak. In fact, I'm going to be fulfilling a dream. One of those bucket list dreams is in October. I'll be doing my first TED Talk. So that that feels really exciting. And it's called Overcoming the Taboo of Touch.
Wonderful.
And it's going to be in Lima, Lima, and it's pronounced like Lima bean, not Lima, Peru. It's going to be in Lima, Ohio, on October 1st. And the talk is about, it was prompted by a paper that I did in grad school. I have my MSW, which is Master of Social Work, but I call it Master of Saving the World.
Mm.
Codependent that I've been. And when I was in grad school, I wrote a paper called Counseling Practitioners' Views on Using Touch as a Therapeutic Modality. The idea being that we were taught you don't touch your clients. And the reason for that, we were told, was because of transference, because of people who've been traumatized, may not want to be touched, because of homophobia, because of um, just boundaries. And so when I told my coach, who I was working on this talk with, he says, well, that's crazy. Why don't we turn it on its head and talk about the reasons why it's good to touch clients with consent? So that's what the talk is about. And it's
Wonderful.
audience participation, where I'm asking people to hug themselves. And at the end, there's a call and response song about hugging. So I'm excited about that, but I'm also nervous because although I'm a wonderful, spontaneous, improvising speaker, when you do a TED talk, got to be memorized. And so that's been my practice, is to do that. So I encourage people that if you have a dream, a vision, passion, go for it. Don't let anything hold you back.
Wonderful.
You
So one other thing, Edie, I want to ask you about, is it true that you interviewed the Dalai Lama?
Yes, ma'am. That was the other dream of a lifetime. Actually, I've had three of them. One of them was the Dalai Lama. One was my trip to Ireland, and there was a magical story behind that. And then the other is the TED Talk. So, with His Holiness, I've been wanting to interview him for something like 20 years, because my career, when my husband was alive, is that we published a magazine called Visions, had to do with holistic health and wellness and spirituality. And for years, I wanted to interview the Dalai Lama, but he wasn't accessible. And I created a vision board with his picture on it. And somebody suggested cutting out a picture of myself and putting it next to him for proximity. Somebody else says, well, why don't you write the questions as if you're going to be interviewing him tomorrow? So I did those things, and I kept talking about it. And then I just put it on the back burner, which is probably one of the hardest things to do in the manifestation process, is you just surrender it. So in 2004, maybe 2005, he came to Rutgers Stadium in New Brunswick, New Jersey, to do a talk. And the people that were organizing it heard that I do PR. And they said, would you be willing to help us spread the word about this? We want to fill the stadium. I said, sure. And by the way, is he granting interviews? No, he's not granting interviews. Okay, well, I'll do it anyway. So I go to the stadium that day, and I have a little tape recorder with me, and I walk around interviewing other people and asking them why they were there and what he meant to them. And I don't even remember where it got published. And at the end of the event, they gave everybody a postcard with his picture on it. So I taped it to the dashboard of my Jeep at the time. So he was with me in the car. He was with me on the vision board. He was with me in my mind and my heart. And I kept saying, someday this is going to happen. So fast forward to early 2008, and a friend of mine is the event producer for His Holiness coming into Philadelphia in July of that year of 2008. And he said, would you be willing to help me promote the event? I said, sure. And by the way, no, he's not granting interviews. Okay, I'll do this. So roll forward again till early July. And my friend Greg keeps saying, you're getting warmer. We're getting warmer. I can't guarantee it, but fingers and toes crossed, it could happen. So early that July, I was at an outdoor music festival, and I was standing there with two friends, and one of them was a photographer. And my phone rings, and I pick it up, and it's Greg. He says, are you sitting down? And I said, should I be? He said, yes, take off July 16th and 17th. You got the interview. And by the way, you're the only journalist in the Philadelphia area that he's granting the interview to. I screamed into the phone. My photographer friend snapped the picture. I don't have that picture. I have the pre-screen picture, like when I'm first talking to Greg, because he must have sensed, my friend must have sensed that something was going on. And he said, well, I'll call you back tomorrow with the details. And of course, the way I described it is I was somewhere between, can I say the S word?
Yeah.
Like holy shit, okay. Like somewhere between holy shit, abject terror, and orgasmic bliss. So what I say is when in doubt, go for the orgasmic bliss. And then, oops, there's firecrackers. I have no idea why people are shooting off fireworks in my neighborhood. So maybe they're celebrating the interview with the Dalai Lama.
Yeah, because you just said orgasmic bliss.
Orgasmic, there we go. That's it. That's it. Call in the orgasm, the fireworks. So he calls me back the next day and he says, you still have the interview, but they want the Philadelphia Inquirer. They want to send somebody to the Philadelphia Inquirer to come out and do it as well. Now, you didn't think, if I can't have it myself, I don't want it. So of course I was still excited about it. It turned out that the journalist from the Inquirer is somebody whose column I've been reading for a lot of years. He was a religion columnist. So the day before the interview, we're at a Buddhist temple in North Philly, and we're looking at each other like two conspiratorial little kids. And I said, do you know, see all these other reporters? They have no idea that tomorrow at this time, we're going to be with His Holiness. So David said, I got a new suit for the occasion. I said, I got a new dress for the occasion. And I said, he's giving us each 15 minutes to interview him. What if, in the spirit of cooperation, we go in together and get a whole half hour? So we did that. We each had our own, like I was writing for a local, like a county newspaper, and he was writing for the Philadelphia Inquirer. So we each had our photographers. So I walk in there, and I see him across the room, and of course I start crying. And he comes over and greets us. And when you meet the Dalai Lama, you wear a white silk scarf called a kata. And he takes it, blesses it, and puts it back on your shoulders. And when he did that, he hugged me. And I have never experienced another hug like this. I don't even know how to describe it. It was transcendent. And the only other way I can describe it is, you know how when you're in middle school, junior high school, and somebody you have a crush on kisses you on the cheek, and you say, oh, I'll never wash again. So all these years later, I've washed a few times. But we did the interview. It was beautiful. It was exquisite. I can still visualize it, still feel it like it's happening now. And I had a deadline to meet. I had to have the article in to the editor by 9:00 that night, but I still had to go back to work at a job working in a psychiatric hospital. I was a social worker for a dozen years in a psychiatric hospital near Philadelphia. So I had to focus on being at work and then rush home. I was already writing the article in my head. I tended to do that. So by the time I got it, and we went back and forth with edits, it was like midnight. And at like 3 or 4 in the morning, I wake up and I look online to see if the article's there, and it wasn't. And so I called the local, there's a convenience store in the Philadelphia area called Wawa. I don't know if you've ever heard of that before.
Yeah, we have them in New Jersey as well.
Oh, you're in New Jersey. Okay, I forgot about that. Okay. So I called the local Wawa, which was around the corner, and I said, it was for the Doylestown Intelligencer. I said, is the intel out? And the person said, yeah, it is. And I said, can you look on the front page and see if there's an article about the Dalai Lama? And he said, yep, it's there. So I said, all right, I'll be right over. So I rush over in my PJs, and I pick up the newspaper, and my heart sinks. The Dalai Lama article was one column on the front page and then another space inside. What took up the majority of the front page was an article on backyard wrestling. And it was something about, and I don't remember what it was, the title, but the title of my article was The Dalai Lama Urges Nurturing. So I thought it was an interesting juxtaposition.
Yeah, right.
So if people want to read the article about it, it's not just the interview, it's an article describing it as well. You would just look up Dalai Lama, Edie Weinstein, Elephant Journal. It was something about how interviewing the Dalai Lama changed my life or something like that. So that was another publication, because the article that I wrote for the newspaper wasn't really my article. It was an edited newspaper article. It wasn't heart. There was no heart in it, that I felt. So never ever ever give up on your dreams. So that was just amazing. And the other cool thing about it, my dad had died that year. He had died that April, yeah, April. And the interview happened in July. So I figured he had something to do with it. That he had connections. And the day before the interview, I was at the Kimmel Center. Do you know where that is in Philly?
Yeah.
Uh,
Yep.
yeah, so he was speaking there, and it was his birthday. It was his 75th birthday, I think, in 2008. So there was this huge sheet cake taking up a lot of the stage. And after we sang Happy Birthday, and he blew out the candles with prompting, because that's probably not a Tibetan ritual, is blowing out candles on a birthday cake. Everybody got a piece, and I got the last piece, and I brought it over into the corner of the lobby, and I called my mother, who was living in Florida. I said, "Guess what we're doing? We're having the Dalai Lama's birthday cake." So
Mm.
I symbolically shared the cake with my mother, and that was a joy, because my parents have always been my most ardent cheerleaders, and even to this day, I talk to the ancestors. I talk to them, so it was they believed in me. So it's helpful. I encourage everybody, find somebody who believes in you. And if you don't believe in yourself, borrow their belief in you.
Yeah, that's so powerful and so true. I mean,
Thank you.
we've talked about so many things. One of the things you mentioned was being a rebel thriver.
Mm.
Um, do you want to talk about that?
Sure, sure. I call myself that because it's a rebellious act to not just, to not be a victim. I am not a victim. I'm not a victim of my losses. I'm not a victim of a heart attack. They talk about a heart attack. I'm not a heart attack victim. I'm a heart attack thriver, not just a survivor. So it takes rebelliousness to be that passionate about life and intense about life. So I put my heart and soul into everything I do. One of the other projects that I'm working on is something I may have mentioned to you. I'm a PR person for a film called Angels and Saints, Eros and Awe. And it was created by two local filmmakers, Philly area filmmakers, Vic Comfer and Rodney Wittenberg. And I've known Rodney for a lot of years through an interfaith spiritual community that had been involved with years ago. But I've never met Vic. He's a retired social worker as well. And the film is focusing on the intersection of spirituality and sexuality. Because we're taught, if we grow up in any kind of traditional religion, that sex is bad, sex is dirty, you shouldn't, even the word orgasmic bliss, that would have shocked some people, by saying that. And traditional religion tells us that it's bad. And a lot of people have experienced trauma sexually. They've experienced trauma religiously. So the movie it's a documentary, interviews clergy people, a sex educator, people from all across the gender spectrum, gender presentation spectrum, and sexual orientation spectrum. And I came on board about a year ago, and it just watching this film over and over again is part of my rebellion, but part of helping other people heal from their either sexual trauma or religious trauma. And we showed it at a relationships conference about a month or so ago. Rodney and I did it. Presented it, and then spoke about it afterward. And three amazing comments came from it. One person said, "Where was this when I was 14?" Another person said, "This film is going to save lives." And the third one said, "This film is going to save souls." So
Mm.
I'm putting my heart and soul and my passion and my rebel, into this film. Although
Mhm.
I'm not in it, I didn't create it. I'm just helping to share it with the world. And it's won, I think we've gotten accepted into 16 international film festivals, and I think it's won 6 or 7 awards. So it's good stuff.
Wonderful, wonderful. So save the best for last.
Yes.
Wow. So amazing. So that I love hearing those comments that this film will save lives, save souls, and where was this when I needed
When
it?
I was 14, and
When
I'm
I
assuming the person had, as an adult had come out, but didn't have the support at age 14. So that's the other thing that I'm passionate about is I mentioned that I do the free hugs thing, but I also do free mom hugs. Are you familiar with that?
No.
Sarah Cunningham, who lives in Austin, Texas. I forget where in Texas, but back in I think like 2014, her son came out to her as a gay man, and she was a fundamentalist Christian. So of course that was tremendously shocking and disheartening, and she didn't know how to deal with it. And she said, "How can I choose between God and my son?" And then she realized she didn't have to. So Parker had invited her to a Pride Fest. So Oklahoma. What am I thinking? Texas, Oklahoma, because they live in Oklahoma City. So he invited her to a Pride Fest, and she made up a button that said "Free Mom Hugs," with the idea that when kids come out or adults come out to their parents, they're not always going to get hugs. So she said by the end of the day, she was covered with tears and glitter,
Mm,
and she realized she had a movement going there. So she also left her church because it was not affirming, and became an interfaith minister. She marries same sex couples, and she's also a stand in mom at same sex weddings.
mm,
So she makes it very clear that if your mom can't be there or chooses not to be there, I'll be your mom, and I'll even bring the bubbles.
wonderful.
So I have my free mom hugs t-shirt, so I go out and do that. And there are a number of Pride Fests that are coming up in my area over the next couple of weeks. So I plan on being there as well.
Wonderful. Well, the time is now. I mean, with all this gender expression, and it's such a great time for people to be who they are, and it's not easy for everyone to accept. There's generational cycles and whole bunch of stuff happening, before us. But it's good to know that we have things such as that, free mom hugs, and I love.
And dad hugs. There are men that wear free dad hug shirts and do those too. I know. I have friends that do that too.
Right, right. Wonderful. Well, we've talked about so many things. We've talked about being a victim, a survivor, and a thriver. We've talked about hug mobsters armed with love. Talked about exciting things you have up and coming, your TED Talk in October, overcoming the taboo of touch. Um, Talked about, feeling your feelings and emotions, to move past it as well, to live your dreams,
Hmm.
manifesting them. We've talked about the film Angels and Saints, Arrows and Awe that you are working on PR for. Encourage everyone to go and look that film up as well. There's a
Hmm.
great trailer out there. We have also talked about free mom hugs, free dad hugs, interfaith couples, and so you're also an interfaith minister. Is that correct?
Yep. I was ordained through the New Seminary, which is a school in New York. I graduated in 1999, and the other kind of mystical, miraculous way that came to be was when my husband was ill. He had enrolled in seminary to become an interfaith minister, and he was a correspondence student because he didn't have the stamina to go to classes. So he did them. And back then, it wasn't even online. It was listening to videotapes or watching videotapes, listening to audio tapes, being in on group calls, writing papers, and so on. And during the first of the 2-year program, I casually studied along with him. I'd never imagined doing this. And so I typed his papers because he had neuropathy in his hands and feet. I watched and listened to the classes with him. I helped him study for his tests, little knowing why I was doing this other than to help him out.
Mm.
So when he died, he was at Jefferson, which is, for those who are listening, hospital in Philadelphia. He was in the ICU, and when we turned off life support, because he'd been waiting for a liver transplant, he was in a coma. When we turned off life support, I heard the voice saying, "Call the seminary and ask to finish what Michael started." So I did. I spoke to the dean, Diane Burke was her name, and she said, "You're welcome to join Michael's class and graduate onto with the class on two conditions. One is that you're doing it for yourself too, and not just for him. And the other is that if you want to graduate in '99, you need to do the first year and second year's work simultaneously, or you would just graduate the next year." And I said, "Nope, I'm going to do it all." And I already had learned the course material.
Mhm.
So I just had to do my own papers and take my own tests, and all the projects that I helped Michael with, I had to create my own versions. And I graduated in June of 1999 at Cathedral of St. John the Divine in New York, which is I think the largest Gothic cathedral in the Western Hemisphere. I don't know if you've ever been there, but it's absolutely gorgeous.
Mm.
So since then, I've married over 300 couples. I kind of lost count. I've done baby blessings, I've done funerals, and one of my greatest joys is running into couples who have married locally. And some of them still live in the area, so every once in a while I'll run into them out in Doylestown. And some of them have children. Some of them, like one couple that I married, reminded me that it was 20 years ago.
Mm.
So their kids are in their late teens now, and it's really exciting to feel like I could be a part of someone's life in that special way.
Wonderful, wonderful.
Thank you.
Well, Edie, I feel like we've had such a wonderful interview here so far.
Thank you.
Is there anything else that you might like to share with the listeners?
Hmm. I mean, I could talk all hours about this. I'm trying to think if there's anything I haven't covered. I just encourage people, and I know this sounds like a platitude. Love yourself, no matter whether you've experienced trauma or abuse or neglect or being told you're not enough. Love yourself the way you want other people to love you. And if you don't know how to do that, if you have a spiritual practice, ask yourself how God would see you. If you don't have a spiritual practice, that's cool too. I don't tell anybody what to believe spiritually, but ask yourself the way somebody, if there was somebody that you felt even a little bit loved by, how they would want you to see yourself, and do your best to strengthen that relationship with the person in the mirror, because you got to live with yourself 24/7 for the rest of your life. It might as well be fun, right? You might as well have a good ride.
Yeah, yeah, very true, very true. And in the book that I published last December, Emotional Strength Explained, it's a workbook, a self-help book. It's a great place for people to build emotional strength. There's prompts in it where they can work every day. I just want to read something from that book in the beginning. It says, "Remember, you are elegant, attractive, and talented. Therefore, you have great potential for helping others, including yourself. You are a
Mhm.
creative, independent, and capable person that knows the importance of planning. You can be enterprising and create a safe and certain outcome. You are strong, impressive, and can be friendly. You can stand out and be visible while still being true to yourself." That just came to mind, so I wanted to plug the book as well.
Yeah, of course.
It's it's so relevant to be strong when you're trying to be resilient. And everyone, no matter what stage or age we are, I think we always have a need to work on ourselves. And so Edie, you've been a great inspiration. I know you've been inspirational to me, of course, and I hope all our listeners will reach out to you if you can enhance their life. I know we'll be looking forward to your TED talk as well as checking out that movie. We'll look for you on the street when things open up and get a little bit more normal.
Free hug
um,
sign. Yeah,
right, right.
absolutely. Hey, well, thank you for the interview. I appreciate the conversation with you.
Wonderful. Well, Edie, we'll look to have you back again. We have the episode airing on satellite radio on Power 98.5 FM satellite radio, as well on iHeartRadio. The show can be found on www.aliciapozzani.com. And again, if you want to find Edie online, Edie, what is that
The
location?
website?
Yep.
Optimistical, OPTI hyphen mystical, mystical.com. And again, on Facebook. And the movie Angels and Saints hyphen Eros, EROS, and Awe, AWE.
Wonderful.
And you can see the trailer. You can see more information about the film.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for listening. Remember to subscribe, share, and support. Reach out if you would like to be a guest or a sponsor. And until next time, this is Alicia Pozsony with Resilient You. You don't have to just go through it. You can grow through it. With Resilient You with Alicia Pozsony and Emotional Strength Explained, available now on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and on my website, www.aliciapozzani.com.